Okay, welcome to Think Talmudist. By the way, on that point, the Gemara actually says that there's something called a tzaddik, a rasha, and a benoni. A tzaddik is a righteous person, a rasha is a wicked person, and the benoni literally means in between, like an average person. So Rabbi, who was one of the greatest rabbis of all time, who is has anyone here heard of Abaye? Rava?
Yeah. Classic
names in Jewish scholarly history. They were both students of Rabbi, and in fact, it says about Rabbi, when he passed away, there were all sorts of storms and terrible events that were happening because people didn't eulogize him properly, and they had to spend days and days eulogizing him to show proper respect, and then God was finally okay with them. Anyway, he said about himself, he said, a Benoni, like me, he called himself average. And they said about him, if you're average, then you're not leaving anything for anyone else. He didn't respond. But you do see that it's not so simple to be average. I'll leave it at that.
Everybody says that. The majority of people say that. 51%.
Nice mustache. I like it.
So Abaye, is he the one that they then later referred to as the other?
As the other? Oh no, that was someone else. That was Reb Meir.
Oh.
They called Acher.
Just gave me
After Acher.
Oh, okay.
But Abaye was a nickname, by the way.
The
He
names
was
I know, I just can't ever place them with their story.
right. Yeah,
Says don't
there's
show
a lot
on
of
me.
names.
You're trying to read them.
I wasn't staring. I was wincing in pain.
Oh, okay.
By the way, the snake reminds me. Did anyone see this? Recently they put out, they just came out with an archaeological find that they discovered that the ancient snakes, the ancestor of modern day snakes, actually had hind legs.
Really?
Wow. How old?
I don't know, very old.
It's got a slither on the ground.
Right. And it was
Interesting.
discovered in Argentina, I think, and the archaeologist who discovered it, or whoever he was called, he named it the Nachash,
Nachash.
the Hebrew word for the serpent. Very interesting. For anyone that doesn't know, as a matter of tradition, we learned that the original serpent in the Garden of Eden originally walked, and after he convinced Adam and Eve to eat from the fruit, part of his punishment that his legs were removed and he was meant to
And now it's been proven.
slip on their stomach. Yeah, now science agrees.
Wonderful.
Okay, we're going to talk today about something a bit controversial, and controversial Jewish history. And the subject matter might not be appropriate for younger audiences. So, Alex,
I better leave.
yeah, you don't have to leave it. Just cover your ears for the next hour. We'd appreciate that. Before we get to that, however, we're just going to start with some introductions. What's the purpose of life? Any takers?
To get closer to God and
Good, I'll accept that. How do you do that?
through prayer and acts of kindness, through reading Torah.
Right, so I think a general way of
Mitzvah.
putting that would be to do mitzvahs, right? All of those things are mitzvahs, to pray, to read Torah. The mitzvahs are the instructions of how to get closer to God. But how does that work exactly? Can an angel perform mitzvahs?
I don't think so.
They can't. In fact, there's a very perplexing Gemara. I think maybe it's been discussed here that when Moshe himself came up to get the Torah into heaven, the angels first protested, was, what's a human being doing coming up here? And then when God answered, he's coming to get the Torah, then that baffled them even more. Said, well, you're going to give the Torah to a person? And it's very strange because God said to Moshe, he said, okay, so answer them. You should defend yourself. You're coming to get it. You come up with the answer. So he said, okay, what does the Torah say? So he says, well, one thing it says is you have to honor your parents. He said, okay, angels, do you have parents that you could honor them? And they said, no. So, okay, what else does it say? It says, don't steal, don't be jealous. Do you have any jealousy that you have to overcome that, etc.? So he brought from these commandments that are in the Torah all these proofs that it has to apply to human beings and not to angels. But the real question here is, what were the angels thinking? Right? Isn't that obvious that the Torah applies to human beings and not to angels? So one idea is the Torah is much loftier than what shows up as our commandments that we have. on a higher level, the Torah can be seen as just the mind of God, so to speak. We were speaking about this last night. And it's just divine wisdom in its essence. But what Moshe was bringing out, was showing is that that's true. It is very lofty. And it could be that an angel could understand the Torah in ways that a human couldn't comprehend, at least in this world. That may all be true. But you see how low the Torah goes. You see that it goes down into this world and applies even for human beings. And if it goes that low, it must be that it's meant for us to be able to accomplish in that way. So why are we talking about all this? Because the idea is that the Torah is relevant and intended for people that have a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. We're tempted to be jealous. We're tempted to, we're born from dirt and physical matter. And therefore, we have challenges that we're meant to overcome. And the Torah is the instructions for how to overcome our base selves, our physical nature, and become more spiritual. And that's only relevant if we have that drive, that draw toward doing evil, right? And then we can actually accomplish something by moving forward. When anyone knows who Moshe's wife was? Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro. Yithro. So when Moshe came and met Zipporah for the first time, he found a group of girls that were all the daughters of Jethro at the well, and they were having trouble. I think they were being attacked or harassed by people in the surrounding area, and Moshe saved them. They went back and they told their father what happened, and he said, "Oh, that's great, bring him in," and he married off his daughter Zipporah to Moshe. Now the Medrash tells us, it's an ancient teaching, says that when Jethro suggested this shidduch, this joint marriage between Moshe and his daughter, he made it on a condition. This is a fascinating thing. The condition was that, okay, you can marry my daughter on the condition that the first son that you have, you raise him to be a priest for idolatry.
Oh.
Not good.
Very interesting, right? So two interesting points. Two strange things about this. Number one is that Moshe agreed to the condition, but didn't fulfill it, obviously. Right, so that's already a little bit strange. And number two is why did he make such a condition in the first place? Let's look at Jethro for a second. It's
He
true.
was the Kohen of Midian, which means he was already a priest to idols.
He had been previously. We're taught that he had mastered every single idolatry in the world, and to the point he was very famous at this point. He was even a personal advisor to Pharaoh, Paro. And so he was very well known. He was very well respected as a priest of all these idolatries. But we're taught that he knew them so well and dove so deeply into them that he realized that they were all nothing. They all were based on nothing, and he threw them all off and came to monotheism on his own. And he was challenged for this. He was almost killed. His family was in danger. They had to escape. They almost killed him and his whole family. And it was a tremendous self-sacrifice to change their whole life, almost like Abraham, that he, against all odds, fought against the world for what he believed was right in monotheism. And we're taught that all this happened before he met Moshe. Okay? So here we're talking about a character who knows that there's nothing to idolatry. And not only that, but was willing to sacrifice his life, if need be, for that ideology of monotheism. And he knows that it's all true, and he knows that idolatry is nonsense. And still, when he meets Moshe, he makes him swear on a condition that their first son will be raised for idolatry. Yeah, you want to say something?
Oh, no, I just think I know the answer.
Okay, let's hear.
Because that son would be so special that the grandfather wanted him to know how low the world could go so that he would appreciate and cling to monotheism.
Yeah. It's very close to the way Ruchan Shmuel. Yeah, it's very close. There's maybe a slight, maybe a little nuance that we could add to it, which is that his perspective was this: how did Jethro come to his understanding? he realized that when he dove into it and he realized himself that it was all nonsense, he clarified truth for himself and came to it, and he realized that's what's valuable, right? What's the purpose of our life is to come in here into this world in a world of uncertainty and darkness and confusion. And the work of clarifying truth through our actions and through our integrity, that's what's valuable. That's what builds us as people. So he's thinking like this: Moshe is like an angel, right? And maybe he built it for himself. What about his children? You grew up the son of Moshe. There's no chance for your own free will. You're the son of an angel. What hope do you have to build anything for yourself? Everything will be totally clear. You grew up in Moshe's house. So therefore he said, because that's all he could relate to, so he said, look, your son is going to grow up as an angel in your little shadow. What's the point of that? Raise him as a priest of idolatry. And if he gets sucked in by that and he never comes to it, that's the price you have to pay. But if he doesn't, and he recognizes what's true and he comes to it on his own, then you've really given him something. You've given him that opportunity.
Yeah, but at the time that Moshe first met Zipporah and Yitro was well before he had the experience with the burning bush. So what was Moshe's belief at this time?
So he had always been a monotheist. The fact that the burning bush happened, that was a direct revelation, but he had already worked on himself to the point where he knew what was true already. I mean, we see that his moral compass was very strong from a very early age when he escaped Egypt and risked his life for it. So he had already come to that understanding on his own, but that was the huge revelation that he had on the highest level of prophecy with the burning bush. Anyway, we see that Moshe did not fulfill this condition. And not only that, but we see, obviously, we don't raise our children like that. We raise our children to be as religious as possible. We teach them the ways of Torah. And so the thing is, Jethro had a compelling argument. Right? It makes sense. What's the purpose of life? Is to work for it yourself, to accomplish it on your own, to have the confusion and clarify yourself. And that's the whole idea, is to gain that self-perfection. If it's just given to you, you're an angel, it's not worth anything. So why is he wrong?
Why is he wrong?
He was wrong, right? He was wrong because we see that Moshe did not fulfill that condition. He raised his children to be very religious, as we
Moses
do
wrong?
as well.
You're asking why Moses was wrong?
Why was Jethro wrong
Or Jethro?
when he made this condition? So we explained why it makes sense from his perspective, why he, even though he was
Because as a
deeply,
Jew, we've got the manual on how to relate to God. We don't have to go through rejecting all the other false paths.
but wouldn't it be better if we did?
No, it wouldn't be.
Why not?
If I give you a brand new Bugatti with an owner's manual, are you going to throw it away and let the car go crash? Go, oh, now I know it's going to crash. Well, if it says in the manual, if you do this, it's going to crash, you should be wise enough to say, I don't need to crash. I don't need to go through all of the bad things to come out with what's right. Mm-hmm. God's made it easy for us.
So we'll have to back up and understand exactly what the mitzvahs do for us. Again, the idea is that even with the mitzvahs, the whole point of each mitzvah is only relevant if we have to struggle. That's what creates us and builds us and allows us to accomplish our self-perfection.
But as a parent, you let a child struggle towards the goodness. You don't intentionally direct him towards the evil.
Correct. But why not? Because it's a risk. For sure it's a risk, but being born is a risk. The Gemara even says, another Gemara says that the two camps, you've probably heard of this, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, argued for 2 years, is it better to not have been born at all or to have been created? Mm-hmm. And everyone agreed that it would have been better if we had not been born at all, because the risk is too great. If we ruin our chances in this life, so there's a lot at stake. Better to just stay in heaven with God. Now that we've been created, okay, so we better take
Obviously,
take
it couldn't
advantage.
be better. If Shammai and Hillel argued about it, they wasted 2 years, because if it had been better, God would have done it that way. Instead, he sent us here. So what's better is for us to be set here. We know because God did that.
You're asking a good question, but you're asking a question on the Gemara, because the Gemara does conclude that it would have been better for us not to have been born.
Right?
So
I dispute it.
Okay, so you're asking a question, right? How does that make sense? Because the Gemara thought of your question as well.
I know how it would make sense, but the fact that it makes sense doesn't make it right. Okay? Something can be logical and be incorrect. It depends upon your basic premise to begin with. And the basic premise is, if God has done it this way, he did it for a purpose and it's right.
Right. But what I'm saying is that I think Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel thought of that also.
Okay.
Right? So there's probably an answer to your question. You're asking a good question. It needs to be answered, but not for now because it's not our topic. I don't want to get too off track. But what I do want to point out is this concept that our existence here is only significant in so much as that we can build it ourselves. Right? There's a risk at stake. It's true. There's high risks to having free will, but without free will, everything would be meaningless. And so therefore, the more dangerous of a situation you're in, theoretically, the higher chance you have for accomplishing greatness. So that was his calculation. So you're saying play it safe. Yeah, play it safe and don't give them as much risk. But Yisro's saying when it comes to the son of Moshe, that's not, playing it safe isn't an option because there's no free will at all, basically. So that was his argument. So why is he wrong? That's our question. We do make a bracha in the morning, make a blessing every morning. There's 15 blessings we make in the morning that have to do with all sorts of various things about our life being restored to us, our vision and the fact that we can walk, etc. And the last one, there's a whole list of things we say. And it's a prayer, it's a hiratz, and it should be your will before you that you don't lead us into sin and all sorts of other versions of sin, and also don't lead us into temptation. Right? Lo lidei nisayon, v'lo lidei vizayon, and not into disgrace. So we pray not to be tempted. But that's also very interesting because that's the whole purpose of our existence is to be tempted, is to be tried. So we have to understand this, and we'll first take this Gemara in Sanhedrin. This is where we'll get into the controversial historical topic with King David and Bathsheba. I think it's in English, Bathsheba. My daughter's name is Bathsheba, actually.
Did you say Sanhedrin?
Sanhedrin 107a.
Thank you.
Okay, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, La'olam al yavi adam la'atzma lidei nisayon. Person should never bring himself into a test, into temptation, to bring a test upon himself. Shaharei, for behold, David Melech Yisrael, David, the king of the Jewish people, Hevi atzma lidei nisayon. He brought himself into a test, v'nichshal, and he failed. He stumbled, literally. What was that? Amr Lefanov, he said to Hashem, Ribono Shalom, Master of the world, Mipnei ma oimrim, why is it that we say in our prayers, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov? We say in the beginning of the Amidah, Shemona Esrei, we start off with major name dropping here. You're the God, right? Okay, that's a side topic. We don't want to come into prayer saying, look at me, I'm so great. No, we say, look where I come from. Right? So we drop that you're the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. David asks a very interesting question. He says, why don't we finish off that list and say the God of David? So this is already strikes us as strange because David was not an arrogant person. You don't get that big by being arrogant. This is a spiritual giant we're talking about. So clearly he understood that he should be included in that list. And the idea is this: there are Kabbalistic principles at work here with the four-letter name of God and how it all maps out with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and should be David, who is the progenitor of Mashiach. And basically David was saying, why am I not Mashiach yet? He understood himself. He understood what his role was. He had prophecy. He knew that he was intended to be the salvation of the Jewish people and the whole world and fix everything. And he's asking, what have I not done? And I'm doing everything I can here. Why aren't we there yet? Why am I not Mashiach? What needs to be done that we can fill up everything and fix everything and I will gain the title of being a vehicle for God's name, the God of David. He says, what is left to be done? So he answered him, God answered him, Amar, inhu minsuli, those ones, meaning the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were tested before me. I tried them. Va'at loy minsisli, but you I never tested. So what does he say? By the way, have you guys heard of this Gemara before?
No, not so far.
Good. So what does he say? What do you think he says? Right? God has told them, what's the answer? Because I tested them. That's why
Okay,
they
then
get the
test me.
Exactly. Amar lefanav
That's
Ribono
David.
shel olam, b'chaneni v'naseni. He says, Master of the world, look into me, investigate me, and test me. I'm ready. Let's do it. Like let's make this happen. Shenemar, how do we know he said that? Because we derive it from a verse in Psalms that he wrote, where he literally said those words, B'chaneni Hashem, look into me, Hashem, v'naseni, and test me. He says, Kil Yosai v'libi, test my kidneys and my heart. Interesting thing. By the way,
Intelligence.
there's another Gemara. So I think it's translated as like mind or intelligence, but Kil Yosai literally means kidneys. And the Gemara says that, you ever heard this term? Of course you've heard it. Like trust your gut feeling. You have just an instinct, an intuition about something. You say it's like your gut. So the Gemara says that feeling, that internal advice that you give to yourself, that comes from the kidneys. It's an interesting thing. We have to understand that the physical realm is just a manifestation of the spiritual self, right? So whatever the kidney is mapped out at to parallel the spiritual makeup of the soul, so that internal drive of advice, what to do when, that intuition, that manifests physically as the kidneys. It's an interesting thing. Anyway, so that's why he says, look into my kidneys, into my heart. And then what happened? Omar, so Hashem said, okay, Minsan Aloch, I'll test you. Va'avidna milsa b'hadoch d'ledidhu loy haditinu. He says, I'll do, and not only will I test you, I'll do something with you that I didn't do with them. I'll give you a step up. V'ilu ana kamadina loch deminsan loch b'devar erva. He says, them, I didn't tell them that I was going to test them. I just tested. They went through it on their own. But you, now you know. You have a sneak peek. You got the cheat sheet. And I'm going to test you. And not only he's telling you I'm going to test you, I'm going to test you specifically with illicit relationships. There will be an issue with a woman. And he knew that from beforehand. So he's okay, fine. So he gets ready, right? So what did he do? Miyad, so immediately, Vayhila Esau Erev Vayakam David Me'al Mishkavo. And so then, right after that verse is, in Shmuel Beis, it says that David got up in the middle of the night and he saw Bathsheba bathing. And we'll look at another Gemara also to really talk about what happened over there. Well, let's finish this first. Omar Rav Yehuda, Shahotach Mishkavo Shalaylo, that what does this mean? He flipped his night bed into his day bed. Right? He derives that somehow from this verse. V'yakom David me'al mishkavo. He got up from his sleeping place, his bed, and Rav Yehuda says that this somehow tells us that he switched his night bed with his day bed. And Rashi explains that usually there's a law. We have a Torah law that marital relations should only take place at night. And it should be a very private and intimate kind of thing. And during the daytime or when there's light in the room, that kind of thing, it should be avoided. It should be very modest. But what he did in order to save himself from this future test was immediately he wanted to satiate himself, to satiate his lust. And he took his wives or whatever it was, and during the day he was with them in order that he should be
Sleep
tapped out
during night, yeah.
and not be thinking about anyone, not be tempted for anyone else. But he got trapped because it was withdrawn from him, or he didn't know the following halacha. Now this word halacha, usually we call it like a law, but this is just sort of a reality. Ever katan yesh ba'adam, there's an organ within the body of a man. Masbio rav, if you engage in it and satiate it, so then it becomes even hungrier. Umarivo saver, and if you starve it, then it'll be okay. Then it'll be satiated. So he did the opposite. If he had abstained, he would have less lust. But the more you go into it, the worse it got for him. Okay, let's continue. The Yishalich al Gag Beis HaMelech, and he was walking on the roof of the palace. The Yar Isha Rechetzes Me'al Gag, and he saw a woman bathing on the roof. The Isha Tovas Mare Ma'od, and she was very beautiful. And the Gemara says, so that's all the verse. The Gemara says, Basheva Hava Kachaifa Rachel, that Basheva was shampooing her hair. She was washing her hair. Tuse Chosa, behind a beehive. And this beehive was blocking the vision because she wasn't just like out bathing. She was enclosed by this area. There was a beehive that blocked the view of the palace to her. So what happened? Asa Satan, the Yetzer Hara, evil inclination came. Idmile Ketsiparta, it appeared as a visage, as a bird. Pasak Begira, and King David, I guess, was a hunter. He couldn't help himself, and he took out a bow and he shot at the bird. Paska Lechalsa, and the arrow went straight through and severed the beehive. The beehive fell down. Igle, and she got revealed. She was exposed. V'chaze, and he saw her. So that's how it happened. Miyad, and immediately, then we start with the verse again. V'yishlech David v'yidrish leisha, and he sent out messengers to ask about this woman, who she is. V'yomer halo zois Basheva, Basiliyam ish eshes Uriah Chiti. Said, isn't that Basheva? She's the son of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite, Chiti. V'yishlech David malachim, and he sent out other messengers. V'yikcha v'tava elav, and they went and took her. They brought her to him, to the palace. V'yishkav yima, and he laid with her. V'hi miskadeshes mitumasa, and she was sanctified from her impurity. I guess she had been a nida, a menstruating woman at the time, forbidden to sleep with a menstruating woman, and she, I guess, went to the mikvah beforehand. V'teshav abesa, and then she was with David, and she returned home. V'hainu dichsiv, b'chanta libi pakata laila. And then later on, we have another verse in Psalms where David recognizes his mistake, not his mistake with Bathsheba, he recognizes his mistake in asking for the test. And he says, "Bochante libi, you tested my heart. Pakati lailo, you came in the night. Saraftani, you tested Bal Timtza, and you didn't find anything, and nothing good in me. Zamosi Bal Yavor Pi." And he says, if only Zamosi, like I am dedicated to, that lest anything come over my mouth. It's a little bit of poetic language here. But basically what he's saying is, I think the Gemara says, Omar, he was saying, in other words, Echu zam manafal bepume. The word zamosi literally means that I am committed to something, but it also is related to the Aramaic word zamma, which means a muzzle. So it says, if only a muzzle would have fallen over my mouth, and I wouldn't have said that, asked for the test. Demand a sunny for me, v'loy omar ki, v'loy omar, and I wouldn't have said anything. At this point, let's take a break from this Gemara. Let's see another Gemara, which talks about this event as well. And this might surprise you. Maybe you've heard of this. The Gemara says, Amr Shmuel bar Nechmeni, Amr Yonasan. But Shmuel says in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, Kol ha'omer, anyone that says David chata, that King David sinned with Bathsheba, Eina elatoeh, you're making a mistake. Shenemar, Vayhi David l'chol drachov maskil, Vashem imo. Because we have a verse that says that David, in all of his ways, was enlightened, and Hashem was with him, with everything. And the Gemara says, Efsher chet ba liyadai shchina imo. Is it possible that he actually engaged in something that was a true sin, and Hashem was still with him? Because we know that if at the moment that a person is engaged in sin, you're departing from reality, right? If you do something that's against the will of God, you're pushing God out of your world, so to speak. So Hashem was still with him. So it must be that he didn't actually engage in a sin. Elo mani mekayim, but everyone knows that the prophet Nathan came to him and rebuked him and everything. So how do we understand that? Mani mekayim, when the prophet Nathan said, Madua bazisos devar Hashem, why did you disgrace the word of God? Lasos hara, to do evil. So what does that mean? The Gemara says it means shebikesh lasos ra v'lo yasa, that he wanted to, he was willing to do something evil, but didn't actually do it. We're going to explain how exactly that played out. I mean, because he did sleep with her, he was with her, but why was it? The way a lot of people understand what was his sin was that she was a married woman. And that's a very grave sin to be with a married woman. But it comes out because of a lot of technicalities that it wasn't really like that. Amr of Dimi, the Asi Madod, Mahapich, Vedarish Vizachusei. Let's skip a little bit. Okay. So now we're going to explain this statement. What does it mean that he wanted to and he didn't? Shabikesh lasas v'le asa es urechiti he kisa b'cherev. He wanted to. I'm saying the rest of the pasuk. So you wanted to do evil and you didn't actually do it. Fine. And the end of the verse is, and you killed the husband with a sword.